Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of VOX VOMITUS. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of the Kindle Award-winning novel Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, as well as the Hotel series and Pretty Ugly. Joining me today, as always, is my VOX VOMITUS vixen, Allison Martine, author of The Bourbon Books, which includes the award-winning novel Dibs, Since September, and Move on Melinda. With us today, we have J.C. Paulson, the author of Blood and Dust, as well as the Adam and Grace series. Welcome, Joanne.
Hi, everybody. Awesome to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Did you like our little cowboy outfits that we're sort of wearing?
We tried.
Yeah, I like the boots presented
These don't
earlier.
fit me.
Yes, see? Very good. And then I had to admit, I don't have cowboy boots.
And then
It's
all
pathetic.
of my
Right
respect
now.
for you dwindled away.
That whole right does not include boots for Joanne. She admits it right here. That's all right.
Well, and to be fair, Allison, your cowboy boots are for small children. And,
Oversized.
and mine are for dancing. So I don't think either of us have
We have
real
no cred either.
We have no street cred either.
All right. We're credless. Okay.
Cowboy cred.
So Joanne, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your work.
And how far back do you want me to go? Well, I was born in
childhood. Yeah, start, pretty much like leaving Toronto on a horseback.
No, and I would say, Joanne, I know you've got a background in writing prior to becoming a novelist. So you have this thing called a newspaper. Some of our younger viewers may not know what that is.
Right, eh? Very funny. Yeah, I started my writing career as a journalist, and I am still doing that. So I've been doing that for 30 more years than I care to admit.
I heard 13. 13.
I heard 13,
Yes,
but I don't know.
Yes.
So I'm still doing that. I started at the Star Phoenix, which is the name of our local daily newspaper, and I was there for a long time. Probably my most exciting gig was the business editor, I suppose. And I ended up, I've been a lot of places, so I won't go through the whole thing. I ended up at an agricultural newspaper as well. So I'm pretty grounded in
Grounded?
my province's agriculture and business community, as well as arts. And I covered arts a great deal too. So it was sort of always on that. It was a kind of a strange dichotomy, really, if you think about it, like writing business and arts, although there's a lot of business to arts, as we authors have learned. Right?
Not well.
As us authors are trying to learn.
Exactly.
This is sadly just water.
Mine's sadly just ginger ale.
Mine's water.
Yours is water. Mine has flavor in it, at least, but I wanted to drink to that, but it's not as
to the business side of it.
Not business, not a 2 martini lunch kind of thing.
So Joanne, you have this amazing journalism background. I know the Adam and Grace series, that's mystery, kind of crime-ish. Right. Did you ever have to cover crime stories? Is Saskatchewan a crime hub place?
No, it really isn't actually, and especially in the days it's crime picks up as your population grows, and exterior influences come in, like drug trafficking and that type of thing. So crime is a little worse here than it used to be. I assigned a lot of court reporters, but I was never a crime reporter myself. But I was always quite fascinated by it. You can't help but be when you're working in a newsroom, because it takes up so much of the oxygen in a newsroom, sort of thing, right? And so I heard about a lot of the court cases and on the ground crime coverage. We'd have the occasional hostage taking or that type of thing, and fires, which were arson, that we would cover as well, and that type of thing. So there was some of that going on in my life, but I was very rarely occasionally, but very rarely on the front lines. It was more really about my lifelong passion for mystery novels that got me there. I think I was when I was really young when I started reading mysteries, starting with Nancy Drew, Trixie Belden. Didn't really love them, to be honest.
I remember Trixie. Yeah,
I don't remember Trixie.
Trixie was better than Nancy in my view. It was a little more accessible,
That's very that's a very controversial
That's a
thing
hot
to
take,
say
right?
Yes, I know. I'm
as
aware
to-
of that.
yeah.
So the
I
number of
also-
mystery authors we've had on who are all Nancy Drew, there'd probably be a whole crew of them right now going, "What did you say about my Nancy, Joanne?"
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go back.
What's funny is I remember being a kid and loving the Nancy Drew books, but then when I was maybe 30, I decided to reread all of them. I decided to like buy the vintage copies and
Wow.
reread all of them because I love mystery. And I was surprised at how much the Nancy Drew books were problematic, one, but two, really, every time the going got like really intense, Nancy stops and has like a really elaborate snack prepared for her by her maid.
Right?
So I'm just like,
I want
why
snacks.
is she eating an apple cobbler right now?
She
When
should
is the
be
wrong time?
investigating.
I know,
Damn
she
it.
should
sorry,
be
there's no
investigating.
wrong
There's a
time
secret
for-
in the clock.
Yeah, but there's apple cobbler on the table.
Yeah, so there were at least like three elaborate snacks per book. And then that just really distracted me and made me hungry.
Sorry, but that's how I write. There's always like elaborate food in there, so I don't think that I have any room to complain. But I'm just wondering, like, were there word counts, and she got there by more
By
elaborate
adding a
ways of
recipe.
describing the
Right.
food.
Yeah.
I'm about 100,000 words short. Can we shove in an entire?
How many eggs are in this apple cobbler? There are
All of them.
6, and then all of them. I chose the brown eggs. Oh,
Well, and I'm still laughing because Joanne, you were talking about how this other element came in with the drugs. I'm going, so these weren't homegrown drugs because I was hoping that was part of the agriculture was drugs.
Oh, right. Yeah.
No, I guess that's
No,
some of it's
not
grown,
really. No,
but
no.
probably.
You can tell that Allison and I have watched a lot of like Breaking Bad and like Ozark and things
Right.
like that. So it's just like,
yeah.
yeah.
It's a slightly different environment here. I mean, more of that's going on now, but not
But
so
back when
much.
you were covering the court stuff, because I know since I read the first Adam and Grace mystery, the Adam's Witness, and I was like, so Joanne, how much of this was your life? And you're like, sadly it wasn't. I'm going, man, at least as far as you getting to be the Grace character, because she's a reporter. So she's the one who's there following up on these stories and having these things. So you mean to tell me that you were never like the witness to a murder, and now I'm just
Right.
totally...
Sorry.
It's not right.
That's
What
fine.
you know,
It's
she had to use
better-
her
it's
actual
better.
imagination.
She used her imagination, and it's better for Joanne's
Well,
mental health that she
yes.
didn't witness a murder.
Well, that's true. It's not entirely imagination, right? I
Yes.
mean, I was on the ground
Combined.
watching all the reporters coming in from court, coming off, coming in stinking like smoke, or, having been hiding out behind garbage cans because some guy was holding a gun, to somebody's head in a hotel or something. So,
Or getting attacked.
I was there. I just wasn't sort of the primary person.
Yes.
But if you're going to write a mystery novel, which is of course what I wanted to do, you got to pretend a little bit and come out of your comfort zone. So
Channel your
there it
inner
was.
building.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, the atmosphere around news, no matter what you're covering, is quite similar. There's always that sense of go, 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 deadlines and excitement, and everybody flinging things all over the newsroom and yelling at each other. It was always an exciting place to be.
This is why I wrote for my high school newspaper, because I thought it was
Right.
going to be that. But
And then you
instead, it
realized
was
high school.
it was high school, and
Absolutely.
it was just like a bunch of lazy high school kids just being like, "Oh."
Well, and Jen, was this
God."
when you were at a Catholic school?
No, this
Okay,
was
this was
I went to a public high school where once we had a riot.
Oh, riot! That's
See,
exciting.
that'd be fun to cover for a
It-
newspaper.
Did you get
was
to cover
fun.
it?
Yeah.
I personally did not, because I was the music editor.
Leading the writer? I was going to say, were you leading the riot, Jen? Is that how that
No.
happened? I didn't cover it because I was involved in the
I was
altercation.
in the riot. No.
Oops.
And riot is probably like overstating that it was just a really epic girl fight.
Right.
Oh.
Pull that hair. There are no girl fights, at least in the first book of Adam's Witness, that I recall, where hair was being pulled.
No.
No.
Yeah, I don't do girl fights in my books.
No.
No.
Well,
It's
and
pretty straight ahead.
And how did you then get from so I admit I've only gotten through the first book of Adam's Witness. So you've got the whole series there. Is that series complete? Is that how you decided you needed to move to Westerns, or is that still going and you just wanted a change of pace? How did you do that shift on
No,
me?
none of those things actually. It's kind of I'm working on the 6th book in the Adam and Grace series right now. So I think that will be the end of the it really is romantic suspense, right? Although it's sort of one relationship that has an arc, and it will probably end. That arc will end on the 6th book, and I expect
Everybody dies.
some more cases, but
Okay,
that arc will be complete after book 6. No, I was writing Griffin's Cure, which is the 4th book, and really having a hard time imagining and coming up with this sort of big scene, right, where the murderer is caught. And my husband, in the meantime, had this terrible nightmare, and I woke up the next morning really, really quite disturbed by it. And then a couple of days later, he said, "Can you write this down for me so I can kind of make sense of it?"
So this is Ken's nightmare?
This is Ken's nightmare, yeah. And what he was really, and I think he really did want me to do that for him to see sort of what I made of it. But he was trying to unblock my writer's block, right? He was trying to undamage it.
I love that.
And so I wrote the chapter, but because the dream was so bizarre, I couldn't place it in the present. Like if that had happened today, you would call an ambulance and take the victim in his dream to the hospital.
Yeah. So was his dream the opening scene of your book?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was pretty
That's
visceral.
an intense dream.
It was intense. And
so is that the start of Blood and Dust?
What's that?
Is that for Blood and Dust?
Yeah.
That's
you'll
a terrible
have to tell us afterwards what scene it is, because
the opening scene.
It's the opening chapter. That was his dream.
Oh, okay. So that's the dream. Okay, because
so that's how I shifted.
And it goes and then it shifts back, because that's kind of one of those en media res, and then we shift back to how we got here and move forward.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so that's how I shifted from mystery to Western, because
Ken drinks
I couldn't help it. And once I had the first chapter written, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. And so I just wrote this novel, and there it was.
You're like,
I love that.
It was a lot of work, though.
Comes out like almost fully formed when you just start and you're like, well, here we go. We're doing this right now.
We were doing that. And so I was kind of concurrently writing Blood and Dust with the end of Griffin's Cure. And it was a very intense period of the writing life there. It was
crazy.
serious. Yeah. So that's how I shifted. It was my husband's fault, basically. Yep.
You can blame him. So I don't normally read Westerns. It's been a really long time since I have read one. I really liked this one. I'm not done, so we can't talk about the ending.
We never do spoilers anyway.
We never do, but I mean, even like
read it.
Once we're not live, don't spoil the end.
No spoilers. Got it.
I'll message Joanne later for like, Joanne, tell me this part.
So I was wondering about the research process for this and how, like, obviously as a journalist, you're not shy of researching, but what was it like did you already know about a lot of this history? How much did you know about the hobo culture? Because I love the hobo culture.
I knew nothing about the hobo culture. That was pure research. Absolutely nothing. I knew that it existed. And I can't for the life of me tell you why I knew that. But the details I 100% had to research.
Well, and you have details there that I know that I knew of such things.
Yeah.
We're saying hobo, we're referring to the people who basically hop on trains and get around that way without paying for tickets. And that they have these things like ways to communicate with each other about places that are friendly, places that are going to kill you. So don't get off the train here, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And there's still a very active hobo culture in the United States. We have a hobo convention, a yearly hobo convention.
Really?
Where
did not know that.
Yeah,
Didn't know that either.
It's in Iowa, I believe, and it's the second weekend of August every year.
So everybody,
I'll have to pop down.
I was going to say it would be a great place for you to sell your book.
Yeah, right. Hey,
because the hobo culture celebrates people who travel and work. Yes, and usually they're very skilled people. So I think it would be a great place for you to travel to with a pack of your books on your back. And
well, I don't know if I don't know how hobos would feel about that. They come off fairly well in the book, right?
They do. You're very flattering to them.
I don't really like. I'm a sensitive soul in some ways, and I don't really like slamming people who are down on their luck, particularly, you know.
Well, hobos aren't. They don't consider themselves down on their luck. So
no, it's more of a life choice.
It's
of, like,
a life choice
to be almost basically nomadic, like itinerant workers,
exactly,
who are choosing to find different places.
Well, that's a good point. Yes,
and especially back
I
then,
don't want to
people were
paint
still
itinerant
expanding.
people as being, you know, in a negative way.
No, and you don't in your book.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
And there's and even like within the culture that exists today, they consider themselves. I mean, it is a choice. They're workers. They're traveling to work, and then there's a lot of like the tramps. They travel, but they don't work. Such and such.
Yeah,
but and, there's like a whole. There's like lots of different words. Yeah, I had a friend who was
into it,
hobo.
Like into it, or actually live that lifestyle. But if they live that lifestyle, then they probably educated you what it's really like.
They did.
But as far as the research, you had not just that culture, but you had different native indigenous tribes that were represented, and just even how the railroads were expanding in the areas. All of that stuff. And I think for me, so my limited experience of Westerns are bad movies on Netflix, not really something that I've read. And yet my used bookstore has whole racks of them. And I'm going, who reads Westerns? And now the answer is me. So I can no longer just walk by there going, yeah, those are for me. But I'll probably just be like, did Joanne write another book and not tell me and look for yours? But that all of that, from the noises that the wagon wheels make and everything like that, you had such visceral, not just like, I did book research, but how did you know these things? Did you look that up too? Or did you just chase down some wagons? Are there wagons still in Canada? I don't think there are.
Well, not those, because they would not be very useful anymore. That was something I did know about, was the Red River carts and how they made an unholy squealing noise because they couldn't grease them.
Right, because then it would just end up gumming up with the
yeah, they were wood and hide, and they would just gum up, and then they'd have to start all over. Basically, they were hard to clean. There was always a lot of water and soap, and I mean, how do you clean these things? So that I knew about. I had to dive into that a little bit more deeply to make sure I had it right. That I knew about, and then I knew the town I wanted it to land in, because I knew that when the railroad was being built, it was incrementally being laid track by track, and I needed to get him past the railroad to escape, to be beyond the reach of the bad guy. So I knew where I was where I was going to land it, and I've been there many times and seen the train yards and have a feel for the place, I guess, and it couldn't be my own city, unfortunately, because we don't have that track up here. It is a different line that comes through here. So the details though were brutal. I mean, I tried really hard to plant myself in that time. Where did you find water? How did you dig wells? How were buildings constructed? And when did the railroad,
how many layers is that young lady wearing?
What's that?
Sorry, I just said, how many layers is that young lady wearing?
Exactly.
The answer is way too many.
But the answer is, for people who are like Western, I'm like, that there's more than just a Western going on here. Because I feel like the Western is mostly the genre in terms of where the story is set. But the story itself is the story of this guy who is wrongfully accused of ruining a woman, more or less, in multiple ways. And he has threats on his life, so he's got to escape. And unlike now, where you can just be like, well, I'm going to change my name and move to some other country, he's limited by what's around him and his resources, and people help him as he makes his way. And he's going west, but it's Canadian West. So for people who are like, I've seen enough of those American cowboys, they're not American. You win.
They're Canadian, so that's better.
And I agree. It's not, it is a Western, and it isn't. It's not quite as I don't know, dark, I suppose, as a lot of Westerns are. And it's also a coming of age story. It's also a hero's journey.
Yeah.
There's sort of a lot.
There was so much of it that sort of reminded me of Great Expectations, or even The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, where you just get this story of somebody's life and how like one kind of tragic incident shapes their entire future.
Right. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I didn't, it's funny, I didn't start with any sort of preconceived notion of what kind of a book it was going to be. It just had to be historical fiction.
Yeah.
Right. And then it ended up turning into kind of a Western, kind of a hero's journey, right? Because that's where Ken's dream placed me.
Right. And but it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think it's just a lot of us think, well, what's a Western? There's just a bunch of gunfights and there's nothing more to it. But you have so much here. But yes, it's still grounded in that Western. So if you like Westerns, this is still a book you're going to love. So you're not being like, well, it's not really a Western. Oh, it absolutely is. It's just, I think most of us think of it as this almost cartoony thing. My generation anyway grew up with it almost like everybody's animated and they're just hearing the do-do-do-do-do and then the gunfight. That's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you think about, the guy in the black hat, the guy in the white hat, and the shootout, and 12 noon and draw.
That's it.
But that's true. Yeah, and there's some of that, right? But it's not it is not quite constructed the way a traditional Western is.
Right.
This is true.
Yeah,
and I think some of the men who are reading it are a little disappointed. But
they should not be.
They shouldn't be.
Because there's a lot of other stuff they're going to like. I'm just saying how many layers the girl's wearing.
And this girl is remarkable, right? Because she wears breeches and things when she has to work. I mean, this is one tough lady. And she's like, I can't wear a dress when I'm out, like working with the cattle or planting the crop. So she's a farmer and she dresses like one. Not always, but when she's working, she does. And I like that about her. I like that a lot about Abby. Yep.
Okay, whose dog?
Mine.
I was going to say, like, Joanne, is that your dog or is that Tabby?
I don't have a dog. I want one.
Okay.
But I don't
borrow Tabby.
You can borrow Tabby.
I just heard a bark. I'm like, ooh.
I know. I heard a bang and then a bark. So I'm just like, ooh, uh-oh.
I hope everything's okay.
Everything's fine.
I'm sure everything's fine. He's a barky little dog.
He's tiny. No, I just like though in the book that you incorporate this Western theme, but then you have all these other things that I still want from a good book, including you've got your action, you've got your character development. You don't kind of exclude any one thing or neglect one thing in order to elevate something else. And I feel like that's a really hard thing to do, including there's romance. And I know you joke in your little thing, like every good story should also have a love story.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm sure you could probably write one without it, but so far I haven't read anything from yours that doesn't throw in a love story. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I can't seem to write anything without a love story in it. That's not who I am. I just think, like as with so many other things, mind you, it's part of life. And how do you write a fully developed book about relationships of whatever kind without having a love relationship, right?
Well, and love doesn't,
or even just a longing for someone.
Yeah, I mean, it can really vary. But I did laugh because we, JC, Joanne, and I know each other primarily from getting to connect on Twitter. And somebody posted yesterday that they were trying something new and had never written a love story and started writing a love story, and they're like 60,000 words in. And you know what they forgot? The love story. Like that's just not where they're.
That's not where their head's at, apparently.
And that's totally fine. So this is if that author is reading or watching this right now, by all means, it's not a slam. I thought it was funny because I think some of us, we just are inclined to write certain ways. And if we're trying to fight against that, maybe it's something great. And maybe it's like, nope, didn't happen. This is just not what I do. And if Joanne tried to not write a love story, I would just laugh until one just pops up anyway. Like, hi, it's a love story.
I probably couldn't. In the case of the Adam and Grace series, I completely was influenced by Dorothy Sayers. And I don't know how many people are completely familiar with her, but she wrote the Lord Peter Wimsey series. And Lord Peter has similar, and I didn't do this on purpose, actually, but he has similar issues to Adam's issues, my main character, the main male character. I didn't do that on purpose. That's a long story. So
that was organic.
But his relationship with the woman who comes in about a third of the way through her series, profoundly influenced me and made me much more engaged in him and in the books, because I wanted to see how this relationship was going to develop and how it was going to affect his career, right? Well, it's not a career in his case because he's a lord of the realm taking on crime investigation for fun.
You do when you're a lord.
Right? As you
when
do.
You're just like, I'm a lord. What am I going to do? I guess
I have to benefit society somehow.
Somehow.
Really about
good
lord.
for him.
So I was very influenced by that. So that was a big part of envisioning the Adam and Grace series. In Blood and Dust, though, the love story was crucial to me because he was seeking a new home and everything that came with it. Right?
Yeah.
He wanted a home, he wanted a family, he wanted a career, he wanted to be part of a community. And so I needed to give him all of that.
And he has a romantic soul. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
he's he's a
wanted to
gold
make rings for pretty women, right?
Exactly. I'm like,
yes. So
it tells you so much that like one of the very first scenes of your book is him making a ring, and giving it
his
to
mother.
his mom.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Which is really pretty sweet, right? Like he's a good kid. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And he gets
and that makes you root
as
for
time
him
goes on, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But that makes you root for him because you're like, you start out with this guy who, and yes, because you started with the scene that happens later where things are not going so well for him, that you know that he's going to get knocked off his sweet little pedestal really soon. We're like, oh, he's a sweet mama's boy who wants to help earn money. And oh, he has a creative side. And he wants to
make jewelry and he respects women.
Yeah.
So
and that gets him in trouble too.
Yes.
Like,
I know he can't win, right?
Jerk. I'm just saying. Just next to, I mean, no, I'm not encouraging anybody to be a jerk, but his heart gets him into places that maybe
his heart gets him into trouble. I pictured him as like the Tom Holland type.
Oh, of course, it's Tom Holland.
Yeah.
Do you know who Tom Holland is?
Like Tom Holland in the movie Devil All the Time. That version.
Oh, poor Tom Holland. Tom Holland is the newest Spider-Man. He is the youngest Spider-Man.
Oh yes, of course.
Like that guy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've stolen Tom Holland too. He is my Eddie in my series. So he's Eddie because he's the only one who can tolerate Laurie Sunkist because he's that sweet. But he's got that just, you look at him and there's just such earnestness in the face and you can just see the sweat dripping down. He would make an excellent main character for you.
Okay, when it turns into a movie, I will recommend he be.
Just be like, oh, could we get Tom Holland, please?
Yeah.
He's a little busy. He's about to play Fred Astaire in the biopic of Fred Astaire.
Oh, I have to see.
I'm such a nerd.
He'll be good in that though, because when he was younger, he was
Billy Elliot.
So that's kind of was he Billy Elliot in the movie or just on stage? Because I feel
I don't know.
I don't think he was Billy Elliot.
I don't think he was in the movie. I think he was Billy Elliot in the North End of London. But
that's how part of his Spider-Man auditions is like, oh, are you able to do these physical moves? And he's a dancer, so he can. He can do pretty much anything. So he
could ride a horse.
He could
wield an anvil, shoot a gun. I don't really.
He sounds perfect.
He's perfect. He's perfect. Let's just put that out in the universe. Tom Holland.
Manifest that.
Is perfect for James Sinclair at least.
Yes.
Does he have a leading lady? Who would you cast opposite him? Fair answer is always Zendaya because she can do anything. They're together in real life. I'm like, it's always Zendaya, right?
I hadn't thought about it at all. Isn't that bizarre? I thought about it a lot with Adam and Grace, but I haven't thought about it at all.
Okay, then who's Grace? Because I know Adam had kind of a person you knew, and so that's kind of someone that you kind of start with. But who would you do as the actor? Adam Driver is acceptable as the answer, but if you had a different person who isn't actually named Adam, he's not required to have the same name as your characters. That's just laziness that Jen and I do.
That's laziness. That's just lazy writing.
Them too. I mean, I've had a lot of trouble with Adam and Grace because I see them in my head so clearly that it is
nobody's exactly right
to think about actors.
Yeah.
The closest I would say in terms of his physical shape.
His build.
His body is
he is a square.
His face to an extent would be Tom Ellis. He looks more like Adam to me than anybody else does.
I don't know who that is.
He still doesn't look.
Tom Ellis is in Lucifer? I'm going, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you said Tom Ellis, my brain went to Lucifer. I'm like, I didn't hear that right. Did you just say Lucifer?
I did.
I do. All like that.
In fact, Mario and a few other people on Twitter and I sort of, had funny little discussions about
Mario, if you're still on here, weigh in if you think Tom Ellis works. Otherwise, we'll talk about it later. But no, Tom Ellis is more of like a narrow swimmer's body, and I was picturing Adam.
He is, Adam in my head is bulkier for sure, but he's also tall and very he moves well, moves like. And I think Tom.
I like the way you said that. Right? He moves well.
Yeah, he does. Tom Ellis
back very well.
It's just what I would need him to do, and I will volunteer to be his dialect coach. This is kind of a.
That's the problem.
Mario's yelling, Tom Ellis. Yes.
You see,
is okay. So Mario agrees. Okay, so here's the thing: when Tom is not doing his British accent and he sounds American, I want to punch him. So we need him to not sound like that.
I've not heard him do that.
You haven't heard him do that? Okay, I'll have to find a
so.
clip of him speaking in a different accent, and he does on Lucifer at times, and I won't spoil more about why, but he does, and it's a smarmy, awful thing, and it just gives you these, go away, stop it. And it doesn't matter that you're looking at the same man who's just gorgeous. And
okay, so that's a problem.
And Mario agrees. You don't, okay, Mario, you don't like how he sounds as an American either. So I will work with him personally to get him to sound
personally long
American.
hours.
He can sound Canadian, but he shouldn't sound like he wandered out of Wales to start with, because that's not right for the character.
True. Although I do like Welsh accents.
I do too.
Yes.
But
and
it's not,
Adam, you see, is half Welsh and half
is he?
Scottish. Yes, he is.
Oh.
I mean, by ancestry, he is. Yes.
So if we give him the accent, I'm totally fine with this now. Go on.
Maybe we could just change that for the movie.
See, Mario. Okay, Mario's putting something there.
Creative choices.
Okay, this is a slightly spoiler, so I'm not going to read it into the record, but everyone else who's watching this can see there's the spoiler about the American accent.
Oh.
Yeah, so
I had to squint and look at it.
I just Jen's doing this. Go, what? Oh, I see now. I'm gonna remove it. Stopping with the spoiler.
I'm so out of touch.
That's fine.
I had no idea, Mario.
That's fine. Well, and then who do you picture as Grace? Because I know sometimes I have a harder time with the female characters because I'm going, they're all me. Can't
It's
they?
me.
Well, she's not me. The woman who is the model for the picture of Grace on the front of the book is almost how I envision her. And so finding an actress who looks like that might take some effort. I thought early on that a younger, of course, no offense, Kate, because she's, when in Adam's Witness, I think she's 28.
Yeah, she's late 20s,
29. And Adam is 31. And I thought Kate Blanchett would be a great Grace. And then again, we have these issues with crossover accents and stuff like that. But she does great. She sounds like an American.
She does great.
Yeah, I've heard her. I've heard her do American, no problem. And I will say this: I always feel like whenever folks from the UK pretend to be Americans, they sound a lot more convincing than we do trying to pretend to be them. And I don't know why that is. And sometimes they can also hide it in other accents. So I know, like when Anna Paquin was doing Southern, she sounded fine, but when she tries to be just straight, like normal American, whatever they consider the non-regional one that you hear like the Hollywood people use, it's a little bit harder for her to hold it. So it's like if you can bury your accent in another accent, totally fine.
The theater dork in me wants to talk about the fact that the British accent, generic British accent and an American Southern accent are very similar in the way they use their diphthongs and their vowel movements.
Theater nerd, I love it.
I'm like, oh, hold on. Let me bust in here with my useless knowledge of.
Hey, it's not useless. It got you your degree, and it's all.
It's all good.
Theater degree.
My theater degree.
I don't know. I was listening. Colin Farrell does an amazing American voice. For example, like some British actors just blow my mind. And if you have seen Power of the Dog yet,
not yet.
Cumberbatch completely sounds like an American.
Oh yeah, well, and he did as Stephen Strange too, and it is funny because you had two actors both play Sherlock Holmes in a scene together in the Avengers movie, and it's like, but he sounds American when he's pretending to be American. Robert Downey Jr. not so much when you're trying to be British. No offense, Robert Downey Jr. We still love you, but still,
we do. Yes, we certainly do.
And the BBC had a whole campaign for a while about Jamie Bamber, who was one of the leads on Battlestar Galactica, that he was secretly British because he was playing an American. It's like, wait, what? He's
good.
Secretly British? No one even told us. They could infiltrate. We would never know.
That's
true.
We
wouldn't care either. But I'm just saying,
we wouldn't care.
We wouldn't.
We'd be good. We'd be good. So, Joanne, you're on the 6th book of the Adam's Witness series. That's okay. Are you in the drafting stage or in the editing stage? Where are you with that?
I'm about a third of the way through writing it, approximately. Yeah, and it's not going well.
I don't like hearing that. What's going on?
I don't know if I should share this, but
you can just call it. It's our show is called Vox Vomitus, which is fake Latin for word vomit. We want to hear when it's going bad.
It's the word vomit. It's the
vomit draft.
It's fair.
Okay, so if anyone is watching this who does not know me, I try to sort of inject a serious very serious social message into each
Yeah.
book, right? Like this is the old journalist, the old idealist in me coming out, and I still feel like I have something to say, I suppose, and can't help myself. So in the first novel, for example, they are it's hate crimes, sort of spurred by homophobia, which is, and the turning point in that book early on is the event that causes everything to roll out from the beginning actually happened here, and it bothered me. It's bothered me all my life.
Cancellation?
Right?
Is that
The
what you're talking about?
cancellation of the Pride Choir singing in the cathedral. So, and a lot of people have objected and said that people shouldn't be singing in the sanctuary anyway, and point taken if that's how you feel about it. Absolutely. The point is that this church, this cathedral, as with almost all the other churches in Saskatoon, need money, and they rent out the sanctuary to mostly singing groups, musical performance of all kinds, because the acoustics are so amazing. So and like I say in the book, the choir wasn't going in there to sing anything salacious. It was like this choir actually exists under a different name, and they sing pop tunes and Broadway tunes and
a lot of show tunes,
classical pieces. This is a fabulous choir. So why did they kick them out and nobody else? That's the issue. It's not fair. They didn't want a gay choir performing in their church. It's terrible. Yes, lots of churches do that. And so anyway, that just as an example, these are the sorts of messages I want to get out of my books.
Yeah.
So this book I'm writing now it turns on things that have happened to two people that I know. One was a client of my father's who is a lawyer, and one is a friend, a very good friend. And they are both, one is, so I'll just say are, very, very large gentlemen, one from Africa and one from the United States, and both are Black. And they're both teachers in high schools. And the way they were treated was unbelievable. And it's a story I have always wanted to tell. And it's quite close to my heart, particularly because of my friend, but it's just so important to me to get that voice right, of the main character, who is not my gender, but not my race.
Well, and the fact that you're aware of that and that you want to be sensitive to that. I know some people say, "Oh, we'll just get a sensitivity reader," and sometimes that's
and I will.
Yeah. So I understand, especially when you're like, I didn't live this story, but I was a sounding board for someone who did.
Exactly.
I mean, most of the stories we tell are not directly our stories. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're stories we've co-opted from people we've experienced. That's kind of our role as writer. But I understand how you're feeling like, okay, would I be the right person to do this? And how am I going to handle this delicately and respectfully?
Exactly. This is exactly what I'm wrestling with. And, I'm very lucky that my friend is still here, and that I can bounce this off him. Once I want to get about halfway finished, just a little bit further, because what happens with the main character shifts significantly after the first third of the book.
Got it.
And so I want to make sure he sees the first third and then how the character develops before I show it to him. But it has been very, very, very difficult. And just have been up nights, kind of worrying about it. The thing is that you could say that I shouldn't be telling this story at all, or you could say that it is up to all of us to object to this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And I hope that my perspective adds something to this, although I don't know if it will. And somebody could tell a very similar story, and that might be enough. But I don't think anybody actually exists who can tell this particular story. Right. Because I know all the files from my father's case. I know this friend very, very well. And this particular story would not be told. So is that enough to defend, me coming at it from a white woman's perspective?
It's a tricky place to be. And like, I have, of course, so much love and respect for you that you understand that. And I think,
thank you.
To a certain degree, we've all been there, especially within the past several years of trying to figure out what stories are ours.
Yes.
And Yeah. So
And what is the
I,
answer to that? Like, is the answer to that if the story is in your heart and in your mind and in your soul and you feel compelled to tell it, is that good enough?
yeah.
Right? This is to me a very big
I think
question.
it's what we all struggle with. I know Allison and I have had very long conversations about this topic, and we have not come up with
There's
an
no simple
answer.
answer,
There's
and
no simple answer.
it changes. And we've talked about where if you're established in your career and you have people in the industry saying it's okay, then it's like there's a stamp of approval. But there will be people who will still say no, it's not okay. And
Absolutely.
there are a lot of people who basically say whatever culture that story's from, it's up to somebody from that culture to tell that story. But it's like, okay, but if nobody knows that story, how can they tell it? So I understand exactly what you're saying. If this is a specific story, not just a larger social story, but a specific thing that happened to these people who are close to you in your life, in order to not have that story silenced, who is going to tell that story? And right now I completely understand going, I don't have an answer for this. There isn't an easy answer for this.
There isn't. And the other thing is that there is the other side of the story, which is, the bad people who made the bad people who made this happen. And from my perspective, I am the person to tell that story because that is my culture, right? That part of it,
and holding your own culture accountable for its mistakes and for its sins, and to say we need to do better. We need to hold ourselves accountable and not just give this a pass for well, it was okay at the time, or we didn't know any better at the time, and just gloss over it. No, we're not doing that.
Exactly. And I don't know. You can look at it both ways, and I know that there's going to be some criticism, or expect there to be some. I certainly got a lot of criticism on Adam's Witness, although.
But the people who were criticizing
you, LGBTQ community.
No, and I remember
from the homophobes.
Exactly. I remember them saying, basically going, wait a second, I didn't know this was one of those gay stories. And of course, then we're like, oh, this is one of them gay stories. And your sales went up as you shared that, because there's nothing, I don't remember anything going into it knowing that that was going to be one of the themes. So it's one of those things where, oh, some people are going to want to read that. They're going to want to find out more about that and what happened. And I think generally most people are going to be like, oh, selling point. Thank you.
Yeah, I would prefer that. Thanks.
Thank you. Exactly. But again, there are always going to be people who hate a certain group, and we certainly don't care about catering to them. They can go away.
Yeah, exactly. And when you do get those reviews and you do get that negative feedback, sometimes it's a really good place to start the conversation from all over again, which I can't say that part of it I appreciate. Although I don't appreciate their point of view in that case,
You're wrong, but
well, I would just say
partly why I write.
Yeah.
I
would say you have to write this story for yourself right now. Whether this book at the end of the day you decide, or society decides that no, it's not your story to tell. I think for you need to tell it. Even if it just, sits in your computer for a while. And
it's true. I'm kind of driven to this. It was always going to be, this story was always going to be the last Adam's Witness in my head. Actually, that's not true. When I wrote the first book, that's not exactly true. Let's say when I wrote the first book, it was a one-off as far as I was concerned. And then friends read it, and then other friends read it. And then one of my husband's best friends, phoned me and said, "Hey, I really enjoyed your book. Have you started the next one yet?" I went, "Next one? Another book? What?" And then I went, "Oh, I see. I'm supposed to write more of these." Got it. Thank you.
That's when the series suck you in, because it's when people go, "And the next book," and you go, "What?"
You're like, oh, but that was the end of the story.
No, and that's the whole reason Dibs had an epilogue that I had to strip off, because they're like, no epilogue, there's more books. Hold on. Throw that out. Keep writing, because my first beta reader was like, "Thank you, may I have another?" And I'm like, I don't even write romance. Why are you making me do this?
Well, now I do. Did.
but now I do.
Well, you did do it.
I did, but I understand that whole now I have to write more.
Yeah, it was quite a shock. But at that point, I knew that I had this topic, and that story kind of thing that I wanted to write about. And so here I am, and now I have to face the music. Right.
I thought about this, and now I've gotten up to it. You're like, I'm going to go delay by writing another Western.
Well,
No, I write sci-fi.
Is that I want to write another Western. And
Well, you should. You can't do all that research and be like, that was it, one book, move on.
Yeah, right?
It's too
The
much.
research was incredible. I'm sure I spent more hours in research on Blood and Dust than I did writing it. Like it was crazy. Even though I had a fairly good grounding in, some of the elements that I wanted to include, but I tell you the details. You're writing along, you're like, okay, I've got this. I'm right there. I'm immersed. I know that every detail about this town and where the railroad is right now, and I'm good. And then you're like, where did they get the water?
Yeah.
How far away is the stream?
I just had everybody die of dehydration.
To get from Moose Jaw to Lac La Biche and back again.
Mm-hmm.
Are the Métis traders going to be back in time? Oh my God! It just so you close it, close the file, and off you go researching again. It was perpetual.
So you need to do another Western.
I got to do another one. The next one won't be as Westerny though. It's going to be more political.
Not as Westerny. It's a political Western.
So can I do that? I think it's taking the nub of that story and developing it into the history of my province as it became a province, because it wasn't even incorporated as a province at that time.
So would you use any of the same characters or just some of the same research?
I would. James will be older, but he will. I shouldn't say this because there might be people who haven't read the book yet. There might be another generation involved.
I was going to say, and other generations and other characters, and you have important side characters that I would like to see what happens with them. So if you can thread some of those back in, I will throw money at you.
Okay, I'll keep it. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Yeah, okay.
But I'm just saying, like, it's James's story, but you have a lot of other people there you could easily spin off and have them be there. So I mean, I don't know how important James needs to be to the story if you're like, oh, I've already explored him. But if he's older, then he has new things to explore. Nobody has just one story.
Yeah, I mean, even at the end of the book, he's still in his early 20s, right? And so he's got a long way to go. Even in those days, people lived longer than 35 or whatever around here, generally speaking. So some of the older characters, I'm not sure what I would do with. There could be a tragic thing that happens to one of them.
Oh.
Haven't we suffered enough, Joanne?
I know.
I was going to say, on that note, we have to go. On that depressing note of everybody must die eventually.
Yeah, I just can't do that.
And James died in a stampede. Oh, spoiler. Just kidding.
I mean, I can't do that. I can't have all these people dying the way people do in books and say, everybody has to, go through terrible things and keep reaching and everything's always awful. I can't write like that.
I want a debate between Joanne and George R.R. Martin, where George R.R. Martin's just like killing off characters right and left, and Joanne's like, no, I'm going to save you all at all prices.
Yep, exactly.
Even if you're miserable for years.
You have to kill some people. I mean,
yes.
Here and there. I mean, people
do
die, especially out in the Western Plains in the middle of nowhere.
Oh yeah.
It was not an easy land. No.
No. Yeah. So you do have to do what seems like it could have happened or should have happened or must have happened.
Or else then it'll become incredibly unrealistic to be like, oh, of course, everybody's like
happy,
super happy and healthy.
Or super dead. One or the other.
Yeah.
Super happy.
Happy or dead. Joanne, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Thank you, Joanne.
See, we weren't scary.
She was never scared of me.
I'm not scary.
She said.
I'm hard to scare, fortunately.
Good. It's the journalism background.
That's right.
She's tough as nails.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you are watching this on YouTube, please hit like and subscribe to our station. I just saw Allison like,
I know. I'm pointing. There's probably a button there. It could be over there. I don't know where the
button is. There.
I don't think it's around here, so don't go pushing my nose.
Yep. So hit like and subscribe, and come back next week when we have author Samantha Downing joining us.
And thank you, Mario. Mario says this was awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Mario.
Thank you. And bye, everyone.